Travel back in time with a trip inside the Iowa's News Now vault.
This is your video scrapbook of the flood of 1993. Welcome. I'm Tim Heller, Chief Meteorologist for KGAN Television in Cedar Rapids. Iowa's summer of 1993 can't be summed up in an hour. But with this video scrapbook, we've tried to give you an outline of the big stories and the human dramas. We've included as many of the flood headlines across eastern Iowa as possible, but still we couldn't include them all. There wasn't a community within our broadcast reach that didn't have flood or weather action every week for the 5 months this video covers. One of the things you'll notice is that as a community, we simply couldn't believe how long the rain and flood pattern continued. In fact, right now I can hear more rain falling again. In hindsight, experts have blamed the flood of '93 on sunspots, on Mount Pinatubo, on global warming. But the truth is, we don't even know why the jet stream set up such a prolonged, dangerous pattern for the Midwest. What we do know for sure, and not just in hindsight, is that Iowans and other Midwesterners had the courage, generosity, perseverance to cope with the stress of this natural disaster. This video scrapbook is dedicated to every American who stopped in their tracks, no matter how briefly, to lend a helping hand.
Each year here in Iowa, the annual spring play of the water cycle determines whether or not we'll have abundant crops, a poor harvest, or perhaps even a devastating flood. The normal weather pattern should bring bursts of rain and periods of dryness, all in the same season. Sometimes, though, the atmosphere is locked into patterns that don't show much change and persist over periods of weeks and months. When this happens, droughts like that of 1987 through 1989 become all too familiar, and floods like the once-in-500-year catastrophe of 1993 become events we hope to never live through again. So how do droughts and floods develop here in Iowa, here in Johnson County, your own backyard? Droughts often begin in late winter and early spring. The combination of little snow cover in the winter months, dry northwesterly flow in the upper atmosphere in the early spring, and persistent hot high pressure in July make for an unforgiving heat that cripples crops and parches our soils. The typical drought pattern features a large area of hot and dry conditions over the western two-thirds of the country, with the steering currents of the atmosphere, called the jet stream, far to the north of Iowa. This pattern of persistent high pressure west of Iowa displaces most available moisture from the Gulf of Mexico to the southeastern states and to the Pacific Northwest, leaving Iowa hot and dry. On the other hand, flooding patterns can develop by having a very snowy winter combined with a mild, wet spring. Severe flooding usually happens when the spring and summer months also feature frequent thunderstorms with heavy rains. The pattern which produced the Great Flood of 1993 looks similar to this one. A large area of cool air was much farther south than normal during the spring and summer months of 1993. The jet stream, located over the Midwest, continued to provide enough energy to produce numerous periods of thunderstorms. As a series of low-pressure areas moved through the region, persistent moisture moving north from the Gulf of Mexico inundated the Midwest with record rainfall and record flooding for a 3-month period. Here's a look back at some of the incredible scenes from the worst flood in 500 years, the Great Flood of 1993.
The National Weather Service says Black Hawk Creek has already reached its crest and is expected to slowly fall over the next several days. The Cedar River at Waterloo, meanwhile, will continue to rise at least until Wednesday. But forecasters say there's really nothing to worry about.
What do you think about all this?
Terrible. Well, it's as much devastation as I'd ever want to see in one place. I know that. I think it's really terrible.
This is so remarkable. I've never experienced anything like it. It's incredible. Actually, it's real scary.
Trucks are underwater, the policeman's park is underwater, and many homes are now flooded up to the first floor. Those living here say this is the worst flooding they've ever seen.
Several miles downstream, the waters raged through downtown Waterloo, carrying debris and rising to the bottom of the railroad bridge just south of downtown. The rising waters brought out onlookers by the hundreds trying to get a look at the flood of the century. Cedar Rapids is under a city emergency tonight, but there is good news here. The Cedar River is now expected to fall short of its original crest prediction. Forecasters are now calling for a crest of around 19 feet, maybe even sometime tonight. Now, earlier, the waters came in a gush. Some of the worst hit areas in Cedar Rapids included this stretch of Ellis Boulevard near the boat ramp, where at least one houseboat came loose. Another hard-hit area is near Edgewood and Ellis Boulevard, which has been closed since this morning. Only residents are allowed in because this is what it looks like from the air. Forecasters say there won't be any more rising river waters, but the current levels are likely to recede very slowly. That's little help for the city's wastewater treatment plant. A few more feet of river water, and there could have been some real problems. But perhaps the biggest problem today was that officials had to close down the railroad bridge behind Pentford Products, backing up long trains through the streets of Cedar Rapids.
It'll be a while before things are usual again here. All over town, people are pumping, trying to fight the floodwaters. Mayor Mike Luck says it's a tense time for everyone.
We're very stressed out. You know, we're all trying to help each other and make sure that people don't lose their homes, and you want to make sure they don't get trapped in their homes. And last night, probably around 1, 2 o'clock, it was a very tense time because the water was really coming in.
When the worst of the waters have come and gone, Mayor Luck says total losses here will amount to at least $1.5 million.
This is Mark Mathis. The town of Palo was off limits to outsiders today. Too many people had been coming to watch the floodwaters rise, so those that did come didn't get to see the closed roads, the submerged houses, and the pumps.
Yes, it's different. It's different for April 15th, you bet.
Do you like it or not?
No. I would just much prefer about 60 degrees and sunshine would be much better.
It's a safe bet a lot of people would agree with that sentiment, but it just wasn't to be. The snow started falling in the north and worked its way quickly south, covering roadways and taking many by surprise.
Just when Dubuquers thought it was safe to put away the shovels and plows. Now the city is blanketed with 7 inches of snow.
This is where it all began. Heavy storm clouds about to pummel Iowa County. Within about an hour, this area received more than 3 inches of rain, filling drainage ditches and making a mess in the southern Iowa County town of Millersburg, where the floodwaters caught many people by surprise. The story is much the same here in Marengo, except here the streets are flooded and more than a dozen vehicles have ended up much like this one, stuck in the middle of the street. That wasn't very difficult. One of the city's main roads, Eastern Avenue, was filled with up to 2 feet of flash flood water. Eastern Avenue is already used as a detour while the city builds new storm sewers on the west side of town. But today that detour was more like a river. With the heaviest rains over, street flooding in Marengo and other parts of Iowa County will eventually subside. But the big question remains, can area's streams and rivers cope with this recent test of Mother Nature?
Rainwater trickled down the cliffs of Clayton today, but it roared down this creek last night.
All the way through here, this was 18 foot deep. There was just a wall of water 10 foot high. Just all of a sudden, she just come through.
Near the Pattison grain terminal, the force of the water ripped out part of this shoulder and poured mud across the railroad tracks. And the rain brought down part of this cliff between McGregor and Marquette, closing the road all morning.
We have trouble here every year, but not quite like this big.
If you walk or drive along any gravel road in Lynn County, you will find they are nothing less than a mess. County road crews are doing all they can to fill the potholes, but right now it's a losing battle. Well, the rain isn't doing anything for area builders either. They say new home construction has almost come to a standstill. Builders can break ground, but that's about as far as they get.
On jobs where you've gotten the grading done and started the work, it just makes work much more difficult on the sites trying to move around in the mud.
These are the sounds that farmers have been waiting to hear. Sounds of progress now that Mother Nature has given them a break in the rain.
Fields are still plenty soggy in spots, but progress is coming along real well.
These farmers hope their recent progress will bring real blessings next fall, but they know they'll be battling an uncertain market and an even more uncertain Mother Nature.
The peaceful morning didn't last very long in Blairstown this morning. Thick, dark clouds moved in a few hours after daybreak, and soon after, the rumbling began. Residents here in Blairstown say this is one of the darkest storms they've ever seen. Here we are in downtown Blairstown in the middle of the thunderstorm, and it looks like it's 10 o'clock at night, but it's really only 10 o'clock in the morning. The heaviest downpour lasted only about 20 minutes, but it was enough to quickly fill the streets with rainwaters. Street flooding aside, there were no reports of damage here, just a few wet citizens and a few frazzled nerves.
Chances are you'll do a lot more bug swatting this summer. Bug experts say this year could be the worst year for black flies, gnats, mosquitoes, and other insects. Insects that breed in rivers, streams, and floodplains. And more water around means more places to multiply. Cleanup crews in Calmer will work for hours, cleaning up storm damage done in just minutes. Winds toppled trees blocking traffic in Calmer. They tore part of the roof off the Turkey Valley School and turned this shed in Ocean into a scrap pile.
Okay. Ground's still wet. Corn looks good, got a good color, but it's down here and it should be up here.
Normally, this corn would be waist high by now, but Noel is the first to admit this isn't a normal year.
In Coralville, the lake level is within 1.5 feet of going over the spillway. This is where all this extra rainfall can be seen in its most dramatic fashion, the outflow of the dam at Coralville Lake, which is currently running at about 8,200 cubic feet per second. But despite all the extra outflow here, officials say it is still too early to tell what impact any extra rain would have on the levels here.
A small isolated thunderstorm with 3 inches of rain is not nearly as big a problem as a half-inch over a widespread area.
At North Liberty's Mid-River Marina, most of their boat ramps are out of service. The high water is keeping away boaters who would normally be flooding the waters.
For people here in Guttenberg who live along the Mississippi River, the rising water leaves them with a sense of impending doom at this point. If the forecast holds true, this water will rise another 3 feet by next Tuesday. Homeowners aren't the only ones feeling the ill effects of record summertime flooding here. Just upstream, this grain elevator is filling barges with grain, but barge traffic has slowed to a crawl until the high water recedes.
It will be at least 2 weeks before Bellevue sees another barge go through the lock.
Kind of disappointing trying to earn a living, you know, but that's the way it goes. Can't do nothing about Mother Nature.
This is what the Coralville Beach looked like last Thursday. Now it looks like this. Do you know how much it's risen, like, say, since last Thursday?
I would say around 6 feet. It's been coming up steadily since last week.
That's scary, you know, and the rain just won't quit.
How do you guys prepare for more water?
I think if they hit 13,000, I don't think we'll have to be prepared anymore. I think it's all bye-bye.
Almost anywhere you go in Waterloo these days, you will hear the sound of saws, chainsaws clearing trees. They are everywhere because the destruction from Tuesday night's storm is everywhere. In Lincoln Park alone, 8 trees were uprooted. To help defray some of the cost of cleaning up here and to speed things up, volunteers are now being asked to get involved. Homeowners are being asked to dispose of their own trees and brush. On Saturday, volunteers are needed to clear city streets and parks. Meantime, people here simply need to be patient.
For the first time since 1965, this is what the swollen Mississippi River has done to downtown Davenport. The waters have swelled above river walls and through temporary dams. Streets here have disappeared beneath the murky waters and businesses have been invaded, all of which President Clinton will see when he tours the area on Sunday. By the time President Clinton arrives here, the water should be receding. Until then, all eyes are on the river. All efforts focused at the river's edge.
There's one place where the battle has been lost, downtown Davenport, where the river has forced man to make a hasty retreat. The swollen river has pumps overwhelmed and parking meters submerged. while floodwaters lap against buildings.
In Iowa.
The president spoke for about an hour with farmers near the Quad Cities after getting a first-hand look at some of the worst flooding in Iowa.
President Clinton says he's going to make immediately available about $400 million in disaster aid. He'd like another $850 million, but he's going to have to go through Congress to get it.
I'm going to ask Congress on an emergency basis to provide some additional funding. And Secretary Espy is going to be working with the rest of the people in the executive branch and your representatives from here to put together legislation that will adequately take care of the problems insofar as we can under federal law.
Federal disaster officials must make a complete damage assessment before any payments can be made. But with the constant threat of more rain, federal help is likely a long way away.
Pumping lots of water is what people in Marion were doing a day after torrential rains caused Indian Creek to go uncontrolled over its banks. Even today, the creek's current was so swift, it wasn't safe to be near. Thomas Park still isn't a safe place to play. In Monticello, water continued to rush down streets today, in some places totally washing away chunks of pavement. Down the road in Langworthy, where a half a dozen families had to wade to safety, life was still pretty miserable today.
Rescue crews rushed to Big Creek this morning, a family trapped inside a summer cabin. Fighting the pouring rain and strong currents themselves, rescuers managed to pull the Larry Koso and Joe Sang families to safety. These horses had to be pulled to safety in Bertram as waters from Big Creek flooded a nearby field. And the driver of this car escaped with his life, but police say he will be ticketed for driving around barricades into the water on J Street Southwest.
On this 5th of July, instead of barbecue and bags of charcoal, it was sandbags, the order of this day. Volunteers loaded and distributed more than 5,000 bags at Cedar Rapids Public Works.
Just to give you an idea of the force of the floodwaters here on Indian Creek in Marion, these trees are not planted here. They're some of the very heavy debris that was washed downstream when floodwaters came gushing through here early yesterday morning. Now the trees are washed up on the bank, sitting in the Kinsingers' backyard.
Oh, Alex, going with the truck, Rick?
These heroes have been pumping sanitary sewer lines non-stop since flooding began. They're engineering department workers like Rick Hermanson, putting in 16 to 24-hour days every day. In fact, Rick can't remember the last day he had off.
When you hear one phone call, the next one, and you know it's an elderly lady and she's in tears, you know, you get compassionate. You know that you got to get out there and see what you can do for these people. You know, they seem powerless. They don't understand what's happening, and you've got to try to show them some type of relief.
From the outside, the house looks fairly normal, but back behind the house, take a look at this. The hillside supporting the house has literally given way, creating a huge hole here. Now, to give you a better view of what this hole looks like, take a look at some video that we shot a little bit earlier today.
Flooding in eastern Iowa is affecting more than just a select few. It's affecting thousands, those who live along the water's edge and even those who don't. And it's causing extraordinary problems in the way of cleanup.
Well, I'm a little concerned about how to get the water out of the carpet, since I know we need to get the water out of the carpet before we get the carpet out of the house, and I don't know what's the best way.
To help flood victims through their confusion, this panel of experts took part in a live program here on Channel 2 called Weathering the Storm: Home Help Solutions. The most common concerns deal with health risks. When it comes to food, Extension Specialist Linda Bigley says if it comes in contact with floodwaters, throw it out. There are also risks in simply wading through floodwater, especially water contaminated by raw sewage.
Hundreds of volunteers sandbagged frantically all day long, trying to keep up with flooded streets and swollen drainage ditches. So much rain fell in such a short period of time that this drainage culvert actually jumped its banks, sending a river of water down onto this neighborhood. Residents say this is no way to spend a holiday, but they won't give up. After all, they're fighting to save what's theirs.
Why do you think it's important to come down and help out?
Well, to help the people of East Dubuque. Just because a lot of people are losing their homes and stuff, so I thought I'd better get down here and help.
I heard on the radio that they need more people, so I came down to do it.
If the rain holds off, Mayor Tom Fleur says the city should be in good shape. 2 inches of rain pounded Marquette last night, but this dike, crack and all, held back the water from the Bloody Run Creek. The water pumping and sandbagging continues in the city of East Dubuque. But the word that the river has crested and is now falling is good news here. There's still concern about the backed up storm sewers. Some businesses do have water in them, and Temperley is concerned about the problem getting worse if there's more rain.
It's hard work, but it's good for the community.
This stockpile of about 1,200 sandbags is only a fraction of what's been done here in the last couple days. Since Tuesday, volunteers have bagged 30,000 of them.
It's a lot of work. I've never been so tired and felt so good in my life. It's keeping somebody dry.
City officials had to close down Shellsburg this morning. The rushing flash floodwaters of Bear Creek quickly went over roads, cutting off the town's 2 bridges. By 6 a.m., the water began to creep into Doug's Auto Rebuilders next to the creek. By 7:30, the shop was under 3 feet of water. Losses totaled thousands of dollars. Many homes here in Shellsburg have flooded out basements, but the worst damage was done here at the city's park, where floodwaters have overtaken the basketball court and playground. City officials, meanwhile, say they can weather this storm. What worries them most is the saturated ground and the possibility that more heavy rain could make the next flash flood even worse.
We received several calls already this morning, and that's why we want to alert the people that there is going to be some backup, and it's not going to be limited to just one part of town. It's going to be all over.
For flood victims, this sand is like gold, and people are lining up at the 6th Street Public Works building to cash in. Raw sewage from the city's waste treatment system is already backing up into basements in several parts of the city. This neighborhood near the old Farmstead plant is affected because it's in a low-lying area and because it's near the main sewage trunks leading to the shut-down wastewater plant.
I've lived here since 1934, and I've never had a problem like this before. This is backed up from the sewer. It isn't from the river.
City engineer Dick Ransom says the sewage backup problem may eventually affect all quadrants of the city. Until then, the city is using pumps like this to draw sewage from the sewer lines and empty it directly into the Cedar River. Ransom says it's certainly not an ideal solution, but it's perhaps the only solution until the treatment plant is running again. And he says that may not be until the end of this week.
It's about the only use for tractors for many farmers along the Iowa River. The fields are flooded and farmsteads sit like islands, making this the only way to get supplies to and from home. Larry Byer hasn't planted 1 acre of corn on his farm. It's been raining that much since March. The fields never dried out. The rivers swallowed up thousands of acres in Iowa County. Other crops are stunted from too much rain and a lack of sunshine. 20,000 acres may be completely lost.
The Amana colonies are filled with sites that are familiar to us who live around here. Today we saw some sites that we haven't seen before. For instance, the Iowa River coming all the way up to the bridge. This raging water under bridges closed Highway 220 near the Marengo turnoff. The same water has wound up in the Amana refrigeration plant parking lot. Just south of Main Amana, Highway 151 was closed last night. It is now a tourist attraction of another kind, forming Amana Rapids. But we saw other Amana visitors, little fish, trying to dart across Highway 151, with the force of the water pushing most of them back. Some will probably become dinner for these pelicans, who have apparently mistaken Amana for part of an ocean coast.
It's hard to prepare for a catastrophe like this, a flood that left our entire state a disaster area. With Iowans scrambling to beat the high water, we at Channel 2 scrambled with the American Red Cross to do our part. KGAN General Manager Rich Herbst says he knew he could count on you.
Well, I think it just reaffirms what we see time after time, and that is when people need help, people in Cedar Rapids and the corporate community will be there to help them. They'll put their money where their mouth is.
For the first time ever, rising floodwaters forced the State Department of Public Safety to close the interstate. That means that people are going miles out of their way and taking highways 1 and 30 to get to and from the two major cities.
Going through Ely would normally be another option, and it'd also save you some time. But officials are telling people not to come this way. That's because the backwaters from the Coralville Reservoir are starting to pour over onto Ely Road.
So for now, state troopers say this is the only way to go, and the best bet is to allow for the extra time.
I look at 10 miles of closed I-380 and think of the possibilities. For instance, how about interstate bowling? And for everybody who's missed the Amana VIP golf tournament, how about I-380 golf? Carrie is approaching mile marker number 9. You gotta watch for those off-the-road water hazards. The roadside rough is pretty tough out here, but I found it. You know, there's a lot of signposts. Hey, how about I-380 volleyball? You just can't beat I-380. I think I'll leave the interstate roller skating to the professionals and take all our neat equipment back to Play It Again Sports. Wonder if that bowling ball's down to the North Liberty exit yet. Strike. And you know, maybe this year they could have Rag Bry on I-380. On the road, I'm Kerry J. Hahn, the Iowa Traveler on I-380.
Jimmy Ma owns the China Garden restaurant in Coralville. Today, he's been doing what he can to save it, including wading to a swamped manhole in chest-high water. Ma is just one of the dozens of Johnson County residents and business owners hurt by the flooding. Now comes word that help is on the way. Access to First Avenue in Coralville is still cut off, and while officials still don't have a good estimate of how much public damage there is, some small business owners now know exactly what they lost. And now that the disaster declaration is official, many will now qualify for federal aid. While the county still pumps water out of flooded areas, the rains continue, a nightmare for emergency management officials. But through it all, some business owners have kept their sense of humor. A few laughs to ease tension where little relief is expected.
Like the Coralville Reservoir, Iowa City may also be heading into uncharted territory. As the Iowa River rises, the fight to protect the city's water supply intensifies. Tonight will be a critical one as they keep a close watch on the river.
On Dubuque Street, it's ducks you will still find riding the waves. While high waters continue to stop traffic here, they haven't shut things down at the city's water plant. And at this point, City Manager Steve Atkins says it's doubtful they will. For the first time, Atkins now will tell you he believes the worst is over.
Other than some very heavy localized rains, we think we're sort of over the hump.
Getting a flash of the flood is something many here continue to do. Do they believe the worst is now behind us?
I'm not sure about the flooding itself, but certainly the result of the flooding itself. You know, there's a lot of homes that need repair, a lot of spirits that need to be propped up a bit.
Particularly after this water goes away and they really see what's happened to their lives, that's going to be a difficult time. I think the worst is really yet to come for a lot of those people.
Schools of little fish have taken over Shakey's customer parking. We hear they're not even stopping for the buffet. Nearby, restaurant owner Jimmy Ma could add sushi to his menu. You wouldn't have to go very far to get it. If you think we're making light of a serious situation, we are. It seems everyone is. In the window of the laundromat, at the hotels.
A simple call to arms by local radio stations brought out hundreds to fight the rising Iowa River. They converge on this sand like a swarm of ants, ready to bag it, tie it, then hand it down the line to its destination. It's hard and it's grueling, but when these people go home tonight, they know they've done a good thing.
It's just amazing.
They're strongly encouraging everyone to get out now because this water obviously is going to be here for a day or two.
Here's the reason they're telling people to get out. The water in downtown Chelsea is so high it swallowed cars and garages, washing out homes of people like Dorothy Mussel.
Heck, I've been in 3 floods in Chelsea. This is the worst one since 1969.
Have you ever had to leave town before?
No, never.
About 125 people were evacuated by early afternoon, some who had just finished rebuilding with federal aid received after flooding last spring.
Residents on Des Moines' northeast side woke to more bad news this morning. This 45-foot wide, 20-foot deep hole was discovered around 8:30 in a levee along the Des Moines River. The earthen wall was so soft that 3/4 of it gave way. The river level is 8 feet above street level here, so 700 people were told to pack their belongings and evacuate. The fact is, officials just don't know how much more the levees can take.
Trucker Gary Wurgis has been on the road for more than a day and a half. His cargo, thousands and thousands of gallons of relief. Bottled water collected by our sister station, WGGB of Springfield, Massachusetts, en route to Des Moines. This little bit is part of 4 truckloads that will come from Massachusetts. CRST Vice President Mike Wood says his company is merely helping lots of people help Des Moines. Officials in Des Moines say about 250,000 people are still without running water. But thanks to efforts like this one, adequate supplies of bottled water will help them through some difficult days ahead.
The country can come together and stand together and help each other when it's needed. I think it's really great.
That's very exciting. I didn't know I'd be so excited about a simple pleasure.
Water rushing and toilets flushing. No sounds could be sweeter to the flood-weary people of Des Moines. After 11 days of porta potties, makeshift showers, and no running tap water, people like Bob and Lori Baker are thrilled to have water back at their fingertips.
If we get a lot of rain, we're going to have a mess down here.
Belle Plaine Mayor Tom Hollepeter is talking about his city's broken sewer system. A section of it collapsed underground last weekend, the victim of heavy rain runoff. All of this is going to cost the city about $75,000.
We'll do it now and worry about paying for it later, I guess. But something's got to be done.
Residents seem to agree. For the past week, they've been saving water, trying to keep it out of the sewer. With no rain, Hollepeter says he can have repairs done in 24 hours, but it may take much longer to repair the dent in the city's pocketbook.
Waiting to and from her home for nearly a month now, Margaret Cook says is beginning to wear on her. Margaret says even one day of sun means a lot.
It lessens the stress. You know, it gets you past the rain, the flood, the general mood of things, and lets you know that things will get better eventually.
Cedar Rapids psychologist Dr. Ron Nelson says a dose of sun does make a difference.
I think psychologically it has a very positive effect when the sun comes out because people look at possibilities. It certainly gives them an opportunity to start looking toward putting their lives back together.
The people in this area say they've been relying on each other for hope that things will get better. But they say they'd like to rely on Mother Nature. Meantime, they say they've learned a lot from all of this.
It's getting better. We're getting stronger.
Just when the business owners along the Coralville Strip thought they beat the flood, Mother Nature struck back with more than 2 inches of rainfall overnight. This area was dry yesterday. The new dike along First Avenue had worked drying out some of the parking lots here. But this is all new water, rainfall from overnight. And this morning, workers had to drain the backwater by tearing holes in the sandbag walls they worked so hard to build. The outflow from the emergency spillway here at Coralville Lake is causing a tremendous amount of damage. Here at the Tailwater East Campground, the water has eroded away the bank of several of the campsites. It has uprooted many of the trees here. And now this fence post is just a few inches away from falling into the river. Shutting down the outflow has also given park managers a chance to see some of the flood damage at the reservoir. Much of the parking lot for the Tailwater West Campground is eroded away. Along the Coralville Strip, businesses already battered by the earlier floods lost ground again. Meanwhile, the pumps are pumping out floodwaters from this area for the 4th time this summer. China Garden restaurant owner Jimmy Ma says it's another example of how this area needs flood assistance.
This was the scene last night. Victims hanging on to the one thing separating them from the Burlington Street Dam. The students capsized the boat north of the Iowa Avenue Bridge and were headed for disaster. Rescuers had only seconds and one last chance to save the boaters. They cast more lines downstream. The 3 victims were only about 50 feet from this deadly Burlington Street Dam when at the last minute they latched on to the lifelines. Iowa City Police Officer David Droll rappels off the bridge and within arm's reach of one victim. Savados helped the other 2 victims into his boat and all 4 were pulled to safety. The road to recovery will be a long haul for many Normandy Drive residents. They've been without phone service, hot water, air conditioning, and dry roads for a month now. They may be waiting just as long before those luxuries are restored.
I never thought of a flood as something that went on and on and on and on and on.
Weekend we had canoe races here. So it is also, people are being as happy and lighthearted about this as they can possibly be.
Residents say they're taking this cleanup effort all in stride. In fact, they've made a t-shirt called Skeeter Flats Flood 1993. Why are they calling this the Skeeter Flats Flood?
I don't know.
The Iowa River has dropped 3 feet from its crest, and today, just after noon, the DOT made a popular decision. It reopened the I-380 bridge to traffic. The commute between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City is now twice as convenient as it's been for the last 2 weeks or so. Not only is traffic flowing steadily on Interstate 380, but just across the way, the water levels have fallen enough to allow officials to open Highway 965 as well. A tremendous outpouring of concern. That's how one Red Cross official is summing up tonight's Flood Aid Telethon. It's too soon to tally up the numbers, but the nationwide broadcast prompted thousands of calls. Actor Jay Thomas of the CBS sitcom Love and War hosted the program, along with network weathermen Willard Scott and Spencer Christian.
I've seen the incredible spirit of the people as they pull together to fight this thing and to try to rebuild their lives. So when I was given an opportunity to participate in this, there was no way I was going to turn it down.
I think it's a neat idea that they invited the weathermen because we're not responsible. Everybody knows we're totally irresponsible, but we are proud that Spencer and I both came here and the sun came out.
So far, more than 58,000 people have pledged $4.6 million.
Dozens of Lisbon residents picked up bottles of drinking water outside City Hall tonight, compliments of the State Employees Union. It's bottled water that Des Moines no longer needs. Officials say they're most surprised by the quick turn of events. The water was here less than 3 hours after city officials said they needed it. Quick work city residents say they appreciate.
Chelsea 3 weeks ago. Downtown Chelsea today, although the water is gone, muck in the Chelsea post office was being replaced with clean water, washing out the mud.
We're in the 4th day of cleanup here at Chelsea, 4th and final day. We've got 28 volunteers here today.
Wilbur Schwartzentruber headed up a volunteer crew of 92 mostly Mennonites and Amish from Kelowna. 65 Chelsea homes are now cleaner thanks to their Christian help.
Excellent job.
This is what the top of the spillway is supposed to look like. Dry. Sure, the water here is still pretty high, but nothing compared to this. For nearly a month, water poured over the spillway. Now it has subsided to reveal this. Destruction so awesome, the Army Corps of Engineers is giving guided tours.
Visitors to the Coralville Reservoir are finding a new amazement: fossils everywhere. When the water from the spillway tore through what was the Lower Cottonwood Campground, it exposed the rock bed from 375 million years ago. The fossils are everywhere underfoot. From crinoids to brachiopods to fossils that are really unpronounceable, most people here say they're amazed.
Look like prehistoric worms over there. It's pretty neat.
Corps officials say they don't quite know what to do with this area. The exposed fossils are drawing several thousand people every weekend, but for how long depends on Mother Nature.
And after in Coralville. That was then. This is now. Many business owners are confident the water is gone for good. On July 6th, flooding also put the brakes on thousands of motorists. The water got this high before the Department of Transportation closed I-380. Look how far it's dropped since then.
Some of the worst damage left by the storm is here on 10th Street Southwest. Raging waters literally tore basement walls away.
Here off of M Street Southwest, it looks almost like a garage sale today. But actually, people are just trying to dry out, trying to salvage what they can from the worst flash flooding they have ever seen.
Cleaning up a mountain of mud. That's what 75-year-old Herman McCullough was doing in his basement today. Monday night's rainstorm blew the McCullough's foundation into their basement.
Andy Smith spent today shoring up his southwest Cedar Rapids home. Smith's house was one of those most severely damaged when nearly 3 feet of water rushed through the area Monday night, collapsing his basement wall.
It's at least that deep, right there.
Just around the corner, other neighbors had the same problem.
The pressure just finally got great enough that the people who were renting here, they just said they heard a swoosh, and they opened up the cellar door, and that old stuff was coming right up the steps.
Instead of cutting and blocking drills this morning, Cornell football players were at the Betty Weiss home in Cedar Rapids time check area. Weiss's basement wall collapsed under the weight of last week's flash flood, filling the basement with floodwaters and mud.
Leadership and service is one of the themes that we're working through with our team this year.
So this morning, they split into 2 groups to pitch in cleaning up flood victims' homes.
The storm literally tore this auto dealership's roof to pieces. Luckily, most of the damage was confined to property and trees. There have been few reports of serious injuries in Cedar Rapids. Amazing considering the strength of this storm. When it blew in shortly after 5 o'clock, sheets of rain turned streets into rivers. So far, there's no word on how long it will take to get power back to many neighborhoods.
Last night's rainfall was not an extreme amount, but the high winds knocked power out to an estimated 20,000 Cedar Rapids households. The worst part, say some of these residents, is that fallen trees have knocked out power to the sump pumps that keep basements dry here. Damage estimates from just this storm alone could top $1 million.
Rising floodwaters are making their way down the Cedar River, the crest tonight reaching Charles City, where water is spilling over emergency flood control dams. Here, it's 9 feet above flood stage. For the people in this Floyd County town of 9,000, this is their first real confrontation with the flood of '93. Unfortunately, sandbags aren't enough to protect some homes and businesses here, and towns downstream may be looking at much the same picture later this week.
Sandbags are no match for the Upper Iowa River at Larry Kirk's house in Bluffton.
Anybody needs any extra water, we got a couple quarts.
As you can see behind me, the river continues to rush over this road. But the good news here is the river has crested. The residents down from its banks are now asking, where will it go next? The Cedar River is rapidly pouring into Waverly, flooding downtown streets, Coleman Park, and threatening the Peace United Church of Christ and St. Paul's Lutheran Church. The river could rise another 2 feet before the crest here, which is expected around midnight.
Between torrential rains and rampaging rivers, it's been an unbelievable year. Many fields are still underwater, so it's tough to measure all the damage. But experts now say cash flow on the farm could be off by more than $1.5 billion. That's a third of all farm income. Rising feed costs are also going to add almost $175 million to the cost of raising hogs in Iowa. And because of the flooding, farmers will spend $140 million fewer dollars in rural communities. That's especially tough in places like Tama and Chelsea, where river flooding has already caused major damage.
We'll survive it. I mean, we've had troubles, but not as bad as some.
Yeah.
So you can look at that and say we're lucky.